4 votes in the first 57 minutes. All 4 said C. One of them spelled it DeLorean. Wrong, and still voted right. The park lobby noted, "Your day is coming," and then the C's just kept coming. I stopped counting. I called my digital pirates, and by sunrise this was on the slab. Built 1981. First trip 1985. Last known trip 1885. The best service history ever filed in the state of California. The board ruled a car can be a vessel. The board is 2 retirees and a rubber stamp. Motion carried. The biggest movie of 1985 opens with 2.5 minutes of ticking. No people. The camera crawls through a cluttered garage past a wall of clocks, every one of them agreeing with each other. A coffee machine dripping onto a hot plate with no pot in it, a television that switches itself on, and a robot arm feeding a dog that isn't there. From a can that says the dog's name is Einstein. Under the workbench passing by so casually you can miss it sits a steel case stenciled plutonium. Nobody opens a movie like this. You paid for Michael J. Fox, and the film spends its first 2.5 minutes reading you an equipment list. If you were here for the Serenity file, you know this move already. An opening shot that walks the property is a director making you a promise. The hardware matters here. We're going to hold him to it. Half an hour later, in a mall parking lot at 1 in the morning, the actual machine backs down a ramp in a cloud of its own smoke, and a kid in a puffy vest asks the single most reasonable question in the entire franchise.
Wait a minute, Doc. Are you telling me that you built a time machine out of a DeLorean?
The way I see
He has no idea. It's so much worse than that. Because the real car, and I say this with love, was a disaster. The car under all that aircraft surplus had a speedometer that stopped at 85 miles an hour, by federal regulation, 3 short of the number about to make it immortal. Its engine was engineered by an actual committee, Peugeot, Renault and Volvo splitting one reluctant V6 3 ways, good for 0 to 60 in 10.5 seconds with a tailwind. The doors opened upward and closed when they felt like it. And in August of 1984, the exact month 2 screenwriters picked this car. The man who built it sat in a federal courtroom while the evening news replayed an FBI tape of him lifting a suitcase of cocaine and calling it better than gold. Oh, and one more thing before we start. After the movie opened, a letter showed up at the studio, typed, 1 page, from a man who by then had lost his company, his fortune, and very nearly his freedom. Bob Gale has kept it for 40 years, and he calls it the best fan letter they ever got. It's at the bottom of this file, and we're working down to it. Every time machine the movies had built before this one was a magic trick. This one was a machine. It's also the only one anybody remembers, and the yard does not believe that's a coincidence. Welcome back to the shipyard. This is Autopsy 8. For the first 80 years of cinema, nobody wanted to build this machine. Time travel ran on whatever was lying around. A knock on the head would do it, so would a wish. An H.G. Wells machine, the most famous one in literature, reached the screen in 1960 as a beautiful brass barber's chair powered by nothing anyone ever explains. Doctor Who solved the engineering by skipping it entirely, and by 1989 2 teenagers from San Dimas would get a phone booth with an umbrella on top. I love that phone booth. That booth is not trying to lie to me. The man who broke the pattern grew up on Sputnik, and Bob Gale has said it plainly.
the shadow of Sputnik, and we believed that to make the audience believe in time travel, there had to actually be a physical time machine. That became a given.
In their first 2 drafts it was a refrigerator hauled out to a nuclear bomb test, and the story goes Spielberg killed it because kids climb into refrigerators. He put one in Indiana Jones anyway, but that's a different autopsy.
1, 0.
Then Zemeckis walked in with a fix. Wouldn't Doc be smart enough to build his machine into a car so it was mobile? And what if the car was a DeLorean? Understand what that sentence meant in August of 1984. The DeLorean Motor Company had been dead for 2 years. Designed by Giugiaro in '74, engineered by Lotus, built in Belfast with $120 million of British government money in a factory where production planning had to schedule around the funerals of hunger strikers. 5,000 unsold cars by January of '82, receiver shipped by February, and the founder walked out of his cocaine trial, acquitted on entrapment, in the exact month 2 screenwriters watching the news said, "That one." What they picked was a bankruptcy with gull-wing doors. Universal delivered 3 of them to the parking lot the next morning. Before the first work order, the intake form. Name the most believable machine in any movie. Any genre, one name, no reasons. That's the intake form, and the comments are open. So, a parking lot, 1:15 in the morning, and a man in a radiation suit about to say 3 numbers out loud.
Good evening. I'm Dr. Emmett Brown. I'm standing on the parking lot at Twin Pines Mall. It's Saturday morning, October 26, 1985, 1:18 a.m. And this is temporal experiment number 1.
Come on!
88 miles per hour, 1.21 gigawatts, 1 pellet of plutonium per trip. The whole spec sheet takes Doc about a minute to establish, in a parking lot demo starring his dog.
My calculations are correct. When this baby hits 88 miles per hour, you're gonna see some serious shit.
And what the trilogy does with those numbers is the entire reason this file exists. It obeys them. 9 hours of story, 3 films, and nobody ever fudges the threshold or hand waves the fuel gauge. When the movie needs tension, it takes something away. The fuel, the road, the starter, and lets the spec sheet do the squeezing. The numbers themselves are barely science, and I find that weirdly comforting. Gale admits 88 got picked because it was easy to remember and looked good on the dash. A dash they had to forge, because the real car's speedometer was legally capped at 85, so the prop man swapped in a custom gauge that reads to 95. The most famous number in the franchise lives on the one part of the car that was illegal at the dealership, and the gigawatts. The Bobs consulted a physicist. The physicist said gigawatts, so they printed the accent.
1.21 gigawatts! 1.21 gigawatts! Great Scott!
What the hell is a gigawatt?
The best second in the movie is the one where it starts explaining itself and stops.
Besides, the stainless steel construction made the flux dispersal. Look out!
Sentence over. Interrupted forever. The engineering reason they chose this car sits half said in the middle of the movie, like a part left in the box. Work order 1. Certified. And the man they hired to make those numbers look like hardware had already drawn one machine sitting in this yard's records. We buried her in Autopsy 3. There is a surplus store in North Hollywood called Apex, Aisles of Dead Aircraft Instruments and Orphaned Electronics. And in late 1984, a designer named Michael Sheff kept arriving at the counter with armfuls of junk, while the owner asked what exactly they were building.
To have it look like Dr. Brown actually built it in his own garage.
He did a lot of shopping at a lot of the odd places, junkyards, aircraft, electronic surplus stores in the San Fernando Valley.
They were building the back of the DeLorean. The ring of little nozzles on the reactor came off a gas turbine that used to power helicopters. 2 pods on the engine deck are oil separators from an aircraft engine. The big master switch is handled with a battery post cleaner, and the plutonium gauge is a genuine Roentgen meter with a new label glued over the old one, because where exactly do you shop for a plutonium gauge? Sheff's design law deserves a plaque in this yard. Half the junk I chose I couldn't identify, and if I didn't know what it was, nobody in the audience would either. Somewhere a Rockwell engineer nodded and invented the retro encabulator.
By Rockwell Software is Rockwell Automation's retro encabulator.
The logic underneath the junk came from a familiar pencil, Ron Cobb, the man who drew our truck. When Spielberg asked him how you turn a DeLorean into a time machine, he answered with the same questions he'd asked on the Nostromo. If it's nuclear, where's the reactor? Where's the cooling vent? There has to be a logic to this. He wrapped the body in coils so the car would read as generating a field. Kept everything bolted on and homemade. A brilliant man with a Radio Shack account, losing his mind in a garage. They could only afford him for a couple of weeks, and he never did crack the flux capacitor. The Yard finds that oddly respectful of him. Andrew Probert, the Star Trek and Galactica hand, drew the polished versions first, and got the note every artist dreads. Too clean. Make it dangerous. 3 cars were built.
It was, boom, it's going to be a DeLorean. And I got to tell you, it was the next day 3 DeLoreans were in my shop.
The A car, the hero, every bell and whistle, the B car for stunts, and the C car they took a saw to, because a Panavision camera does not fit inside a DeLorean, and something had to give. Mr. Fusion, when 2015 came calling, is a Krupp's coffee grinder, the joke being Mr. Coffee, and 1 phone call for the record. A product placement man offered $75,000 to make the time machine a Ford Mustang. The answer has entered legend. Doc Brown doesn't drive a Mustang. The machine now looked like it could kill you, because the fuel in this movie was never set decoration. It was stolen, and the people it was stolen from are already driving to the mall. Doc's reactor runs on plutonium, and in 1985 you cannot buy plutonium. So he made a deal. A group of Libyan nationalists supplied a pellet in exchange for a working bomb, and Doc handed them a shiny casing full of used pinball machine parts. The movie could have left that as a one-line joke. Instead, it books the debt.
They found me. I don't know how, but they found me. Who do you think? The Libyans!
That's the inventor of the time machine face down in a mall parking lot, half an hour into a family film, killed by his own fuel supply. Find another summer blockbuster that opens by collecting on the hero's procurement fraud. Strand the machine in 1955, and the whole second act becomes a fuel problem. Because the one thing in town that can push out 1.21 gigawatts is a bolt of lightning, the film has already scheduled. To the minute. On a flyer in Marty's pocket. And the reason that lightning bolt exists at all is the best piece of trivia in this entire file. The original ending had the fridge at a nuclear test site, and Universal ordered $1 million cut from the budget. So the Bobs walked the backlot hunting for something cheaper than a bomb, looked up at the courthouse, and invented the clock tower. The best sequence in the film exists because the production ran out of fuel money too. By 2015 the reactor's been swapped for a Mr. Fusion that eats banana peels, and you'd think the ledger closes. It half closes. Mr. Fusion feeds the time circuits, but the wheels still burn gasoline.
But the internal combustion engine runs on ordinary gasoline.
And the third film builds its entire last act inside that distinction. The tank tears open in 1885. Gasoline won't exist for years. Horses top out at walking pace. The whiskey substitute blows the fuel injection apart, and the only machine in the county that can shove anything to 88 is a steam locomotive. The finale of one of the biggest trilogies ever made is a refueling operation. Grandma's been in the lab since Tuesday, with a stopwatch, a satellite map of a mall in California, and 2 questions she's been sitting on since 1985. Check 1. The parking lot. The film says Twin Pines Mall. The cameras say Puente Hills Mall, City of Industry, California. And the longest straight run in that lot, measured off the satellite, is about 300 meters. A stock DMC-12 needs 10.5 seconds just to reach 60, and the arithmetic says 88 arrives after roughly 550 meters of tarmac. A fan with a real DeLorean once tried it in that exact lot and reported back, no chance. Hollywood second gear. It's a tradition. In the movie's defense, Doc treats the run like a test. Painted start line, synchronized alarm clocks, a fire extinguisher standing by. The first time travel in cinema conducted under a written procedure. Verdict. Second gear of destiny. Check 2. The cable. An average bolt of lightning carries 30,000 amps, at 5 times the surface temperature of the sun, and the lethal dose for a human heart is about 1/10 of 1 amp. Doc conducts this event into the car through a hook, while personally holding the cable on a wet ledge in a storm. Grandma's verdict fits on one line of the whiteboard. The hook survives. The man does not. Yes, he's wearing rubber-soled shoes. Send the theories. The lab reads everything. Verdict. Deceased. Twice. But the number in the middle of it, the one people have giggled at for 40 years. 1.21 gigawatts out of a lightning bolt. A real strike peaks far higher, for a few microseconds, and averaged across the discharge, you can defend a figure sitting almost exactly where Doc put it. The silliest sounding spec in the movie is the one that checks out. Verdict. Within tolerance. And one more thing Grandma logged while she was in there. Across 3 films, this car is asked to start on cue, with a gun, a storm, or a posse on the clock, 4 separate times. You already know how that went. Every DeLorean owner, in every interview, eventually says the same sentence about their car. It's never done. There's always a relay, a window motor, a gasket with opinions.
So at this point I've done fuel lines, the alternator, fuses and relays, radiator fan.
The film's new, and they turned it into the most honest running gag in the trilogy. The starter, Libyans in the mirror. The key turns, the engine coughs and dies, outrunning a lightning storm, with seconds on the clock, coughs and dies. 1885, a posse closing in, dies again. The most expensive prop on the Universal lot behaves, at every single climax, exactly like a used DMC-12. And audiences who never touched one believe the car completely, because every adult in the theater has sat in that seat, turning that key, saying please. Then the deep cut. The lightning bolt that throws Doc to 1885 also burns out the time circuit control chip. The readout had been glitching all night, flashing dates on its own. And when 1955 Doc repairs it, he can't fake 1985 microelectronics. So the replacement is a rack of vacuum tubes the size of a suitcase, bolted to the hood. And the car wears that repair, visibly, for the rest of the film. Autopsy 7 watched Serenity lose a hull panel and never get it back. Same law, 5 years earlier, damage persists, and repairs look like where you got them. And every one of those repairs is only possible for one reason. Somebody, somewhere in this trilogy, always kept a drawing. November 5th, 1955. A man sleeps hanging a clock above his toilet, comes to with a picture in his head and draws it. A Y of wires, in a box. 30 years later to the day, that drawing is bolted into a sports car, and the cleanest scene in the film is young Doc holding his fresh sketch against the open machine, while the two of them match. His whole life ran on one piece of paper, and the movie shows you the paper. It keeps doing this. The clock tower operation runs off a scale model built overnight, with an apology attached.
Please excuse the crudity of this model. I didn't have time to build it to scale or to paint it. It's good.
The yard would like that printed on its flag. The 1985 Doc leaves his 1955 self, a camcorder tape that works as an instruction manual, and the best courier delivery in cinema, a letter posted in 1885, held by Western Union for 70 years, and handed to a soaked teenager on a highway shoulder at the exact minute it promises, containing the location of a buried DeLorean and the instructions for raising it. 2 entire films run on documents this machine generated about itself, and the paper never stopped. In 2020, the Time Machine got a real owner's workshop manual, co-written by Bob Gale himself. Serenity's fans bought her blueprints. This machine's own screenwriter published the service documentation, which makes what the studio did to the actual cars genuinely hard to say out loud. Of the 7 DeLoreans Universal built, how many do you think were still whole when the camera stopped? They killed it with a train, a real one. The B car, the stunt car from all 3 films, was dressed to full detail, rigged with charges and parked on the rails. And what comes apart in the front of that frame is genuine screen-used DeLorean. No miniature, no Matty. Marty gets one line over the wreckage.
It's destroyed. Just like you wanted.
And the film's answer, minutes later, is Doc arriving in a new machine. A steam locomotive dressed in pressure gauges and color-coded fuel logs. A time machine that announces its engineering before it announces its magic. Even the replacement obeys the house rules. That's the whole active file. Machine certified, machine destroyed, succession documented. What's left is the question this channel exists for, and it needs a control group. What happens when a movie builds the machine and skips the ledger? In 2002, DreamWorks filmed H.G. Wells' The Time Machine, directed by Simon Wells, the author's actual great-grandson, and the machine they built is, and I will not be argued with, the most beautiful time machine ever put on film. Brass, crystal, spinning rings of light you could hang in a gallery. Now the service questions. What does it run on? Never stated. What does a trip cost? Nothing. When does it break? When the script says so, and never a page sooner. It is jewelry that grants wishes. And be honest, when did somebody last bring it up in your presence? That result clears the DeLorean of the one charge still pending. That it's remembered for being pretty. The prettier machine is a trivia answer. Beauty was never the variable. The ledger was. Honorable mention to the phone booth. 0 rules, 0 fuel, 0 shame. Total commitment to the beat is its own kind of honesty, and the yard respects it. So the machine works, the machine is loved, and the file should close. Except the yard owes you the end of a story. 7 cars, a studio backlot, 30 years of California sun, and a letter. The fleet ended badly. The fiberglass flying car rotted on a display stand and was quietly reported destroyed. The desert cars went to parts, and the sea car, the one they cut open for the cameras, sat outside at the studio until the weather finished what the saw started. The B car died on the rails, on purpose, on film, and the A car, the hero, the one in every close-up you have ever loved, was parked outdoors on the Universal lot and left there for the better part of 2 decades, while the parts walked away one by one, and a family of rats moved into the cabin. The most famous car in the history of movies. Rats. In 2011, Universal wheeled it out for a Nike charity event, and in the crowd stood Bob Gale, looking at the wreck, parked next to a fan-built replica that was frankly in better shape than the original. That contrast did it, and the studio made a decision the yard genuinely loves. The job went to the fans. Joe Walser, a man who had spent years building replicas so exact he'd been sneaking onto the lot at night to measure the real car screw by screw, was handed custody of the actual machine. 3 dozen volunteers behind him, and a mandate with a beautiful order of operations: restore the showroom DeLorean first, then build the time machine on top. The original Goodyears were saved by sliding inner tubes inside them, so the movie rubber still holds the movie weight. When the team needed the keypad that sets the destination time, a fan raised his hand and said, "I have 5 of those." Of course he did. Since April of 2016, she sits in the Peterson Museum in Los Angeles, restored down to the relabeled Roentgen meter. and the man who led the work co-wrote the owner's manual with Bob Gale, which leaves the letter. I told you we'd get to the bottom of the file. Summer of 1985. John DeLorean. Company gone. Fortune gone. Freshly acquitted. Watches a movie turn his failure into the most desirable object on any screen, sits down and types 1 page to 2 men he has never met. Thank you, it says, for continuing my dream. He calls the film absolutely brilliant. And then the detail that gets me every time. He thanks the crew by name. Ron Cobb, Andrew Probert, Michael Sheffer, Kevin Pike, the men who built the fake version of his car, and he invites them warmly and formally to join the design team of a company that existed by then entirely in his head. About 9,000 DeLoreans ever left that factory in Belfast. Thousands are still on the road, kept alive by clubs and a Texas warehouse full of factory parts, and a healthy number of them wear flux capacitors. A fan got pulled over a few years back doing exactly 88.
Kevin McGee, just a moment to figure it out.
And that's when I realized that 88 miles an hour, DeLorean, Back to the Future.
The officer knew precisely what was happening and wrote the ticket anyway. Correctly. 5 stamps. The machine on this slab was a lemon with a spec sheet, and the yard certifies her with pleasure, because the record now shows it twice in a row. The honest ones get remembered, and the next slab is already booked because the yard keeps its promises. Dinosaurs, double S. This one's for you. Bring gloves. The park is coming in. The yard counts everything, even the ones that come back.
Hey, Doc, we better back up. We don't have enough road to get up to 88.
Roads? Well, we're going, we don't need roads.